Okay, it's being recorded, so I'm going to leave the meeting now. Just kidding.
Let's see. I believe it's 9 o'clock. Do others have 9 a.m. at the moment?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So as it's 9 a.m., I would like to call the June 24th meeting of the Waterways Advisory Committee to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
Muted.
Let the record reflect that all committee members are present with the exception of committee member Adam Sharon.
Okay. Are there any statements by committee members prior to continuing on the agenda?
Would this be the time to let the committee know that I need to recuse myself from the main agenda item, the Stony Point Flats agenda item?
We can actually wait until that agenda item comes up.
Okay.
A few other items before that.
Okay, so you've done the roll call, Michelle, or okay, why don't we proceed? Amy, did you want to make a comment at this point?
Yes, Michelle, would it be possible to put up the PowerPoint slide? So we do just want to note that we are at Santa Rosa here committed to a safe and inclusive environment. And so we want to make sure that everyone acts accordingly and that staff will be ready to remove people if there are any issues or disrespect. And we will end the meeting if necessary. Just wanted to let everyone know that. So we do expect this meeting to be held in accordance to this statement here. Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to just let the public know, and by the way, I do welcome members of the public. We're always pleased to hear what people have to say. I do want to say, though, that the role of the Waterways Committee is pretty much as the title of our committee would indicate. We review projects only when they are adjoining creeks, and we look at the interface between a project site and the creek environment. And we don't really deal with more general land use issues on developments. Even if they adjoin the creek, we look at the creek interface. With that, I'd like to move on to the advisory committee reports. I don't have one of my own. Are there any reports anyone has from the committee? Okay, hearing none, we can now start with public comment on items that are non-agenda items. Item 4, this is the time when any person may address the subcommittee on members not listed on the agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Waterways Advisory Committee.
If you wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand now. And for our call-in participants, please select *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute. And I am not seeing any hands.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item is item 5, the department report. Are there any reports for the committee by the department, water department or Sonoma Water today?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start. I have just one item, and that is that we are anticipating moving into a hybrid meeting format, most likely this fall. And that's really being driven by the executive order by the governor's office. And so we have heard that the executive order that suspends some of the Brown Act rules in light of the pandemic, that will be rescinded in September. So we'll be providing more information about how we plan to proceed, but there is direction right now to continue in a hybrid format. So we will allow the public to attend and view by Zoom or other method, and then also have people available to come or have a place available for the public to attend as well. So we'll be providing some more information on that in the coming months as we get closer. And that's the only report I have from my department at this time.
I have a question on that.
Mhm.
Does that apply to the committee members also, that we can either Zoom or be in person?
I'm not sure at this point, so we'll get into that issue too.
Okay.
Hey, thank you. I don't hear any other reports at the
If
moment.
Brady's here, he might have a report.
Oh, welcome.
All right, good morning, Chair, members of the committee, and I'm happy to report our Lower Colgan Creek Restoration Phase 2 project is underway. So we were able to get in the creek on June 15th and do our aquatic species relocation. And this year, one plus from the drought is there actually was not a lot of water and not a lot of pooled water to remove the fish and crayfish from. So things got underway pretty quickly, and our contractor is fast at work, and the channel is already completely cleared of all the vegetation, and things are, like I said, moving well. And again, this is about a 2,200 foot section of Colgan Creek downstream of Victoria Drive, and it's a complete channel reconstruction with a restoration, in-stream habitat features, plantings, and a paved pathway. So things are going well, and it's kind of for me, I think it's been years of work to get to this point with the planning, the permitting, and the grants and the funding. So it's kind of the easy part for me now to watch the contractor and our engineers, get this thing built.
Congratulations, Steve. It's been a long time. When did this project start, by the way? In terms
Well,
of
really, the Colgan Creek restoration, and it is a 3-phase project. It was initially approved by the council in 2002. And then we were busy underway with the different phases of the Prince Greenway in the mid 2000s. And then we constructed phase 1 near Elsie Allen in 2014. And then more recently, we've had issues with the fires and the COVID pandemic, so we've been delayed a couple of years. So it was actually out to bid last year, and then the city canceled all construction projects that weren't already awarded last year.
So congratulations, great work to you and all the staff that have been involved.
All right, thank you, and I think Alistair has a report on our creek stewardship program.
Can I ask a question of Steve before we move to Alistair?
Of course.
We just looked at a project on the other side of Colgan Creek that borders the east southern canine companions. And they're going to be they're going to be doing, fairly large development there for their facility. And we asked them if they'd be interacting with you guys concerning that. First, have they interacted with you? And second, do you see any potential issues? I don't think it's been fully approved yet.
Yeah, I have not been contacted by them, but basically their facility is fenced off from the creek to keep a separation there. So I think probably the interaction there may be some plantings they could have along their side of the fence that are more sort of creek applicable plantings. So, and our project will be completely separate from them. Like, we don't need any property from them or anything like that to construct our project.
No, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Alistair.
Hello. One thing I think is interesting is that even though there wasn't much water in that stretch of Colgan Creek, that Steve and his crew, they removed over 5,000 fish from that area and transported them to other pools that would hopefully hold water through the summer. So, there's a lot of life in our creeks that we don't see. And the creeks, I think they're doing okay this summer, except there's very little water in them. I think we're going to see the lowest levels that any of us have ever seen in them. In the meantime, we do have a youth corps crew that is hired by the Sonoma County, by Sonoma Water. It's a summer youth corps crew, but basically our stormwater and creek staff is directing them on projects that are vegetation management, trail clearing. Of course, there's always trash to pick up, but we have 8 weeks of their work. They're into week 2. They'll be hitting all around the city, getting different places. We also started our summer youth outreach through Boys and Girls Club, the neighborhood revitalization summer day camps, or not the day camps, but they're summer camps, not the big camps in the parks, and also with some schools that run summer programs. So those got underway this week. We're still not hosting or sponsoring volunteer events, but we do support different groups that come out and organize themselves, and then we'll be out there for a safety briefing to work with them to haul off the trash. And just yesterday was contacted by the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, and they're interested in seeing what they can do to help keep the trails clean. You might have seen a letter to the editor commenting on what they said is a sorry state down at Prince Memorial Greenway. And that always kind of hurts me because we put in a lot of time down there and a lot of effort, but it is still not as welcoming to the public as I'd like to see it. But we'll be down there tomorrow with our cleanup crew, and we were down there earlier this week, just all the time. But it needs so much more attention than we're able to give it right now. And neighbors all around the city have vegetation concerns about weed abatement and all the vegetation in the creek. And that's kind of a tricky thing because the vegetation in the creek is habitat. It does keep the creek water cool and fresher and higher quality, but there's always a great fear of fire. In fact, the fire department is putting out little spot fires just about every day that are in vacant lots up against abandoned buildings along creeks. I don't know, some of them might be intentionally set, but otherwise, just a little cooking fire gets out of control or somebody smoking something. We're getting also reports through a My Santa Rosa reporting system that's really helpful. And a lot of the reports kind of are about chronic areas, such as there's a huge camp in Pomo Creek at Northwest, right in the middle of Northwest Community Park, that the city has not been able to resolve. The stuff along the Prince Greenway. The Greenway has much fewer camps now, but a lot of those people have just spread out downstream along downstream of Pearson Street towards Stony Point Road, where there is thick concealing vegetation, and they're able to get down to the water, very hard to see even from the trail right above. So we have still big problems with people congregating and living in our creeks. The one other thing I was thinking of, oh shoot. Well, I'm sorry, I can't remember that. It's just another thing that we're doing that kind of help creeks out along here. And I can't remember what that was, but you as committee members, anybody out there in the audience, if you see things that need attention, if you could email creeks@srcity.org, that's the best way to get attention to those matters.
Thank you, Alistair, for your fine work. Are there any questions of Alistair by committee members?
Yes, I have. Alistair, when will I'm sorry. When will the citizen volunteer cleanup stuff start?
That's not been determined yet. I'm hoping that this fall, maybe, Creek Week will be the 3rd week in September. By then we can really announce and, to bring out the whole public. Right now, we just groups that organize themselves. There's kind of the feeling that these people know each other. They're comfortable being around each other. And if they organize themselves, we can support them. But just to invite anybody in, is not what the city's looking at right now. Everything is kind of, as we transition out of this last year, it's being worked out at levels, and we'll get a heads up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, again, Alistair, thank you. We always appreciate your
Welcome.
hard work and involvement in our committee. Was there someone else who wanted to ask a question, or should we move on? Okay, our first and only item on the agenda is item 6.1, the Stony Point Flats Apartments. Prior to starting the presentation by staff, I'd like to ask if there are any disclosures regarding any contact by any committee members with the general public or with the applicant. And also, I know that Kevin would like to make a statement. Kevin, would you like to?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I need to recuse myself from this issue due to a prior professional relationship with the owner of the property. So I will step off at this point and join the audience on YouTube. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. So are there any disclosures of any kind of contact with applicant or interested members of the public regarding the project?
Yes, I need to make a couple disclosures. I have had professional relationships with two of the professional firms that are supporting this project, Civil Design Consultants and PJC. None of those create any problems for me with this project. And I also, I'm part of a neighborhood group that's interacting with this neighborhood group. And I haven't had any meetings with them. I've seen emails, but I don't have any direct correspondence with them. And I don't feel that's an issue for me either.
Well, thank you, Art. Anyone else? Carol.
I just wanted to say I have had the opportunity to review, I think, all of the correspondence that's come in either directly from the public or via staff.
Well, great. Thank you, Carol. Yeah, we have received several emails, and they have been passed along to us. I also have reviewed them. I'm sure all committee members have, as we have received them during the last week or so. Any other comments before we move to the item by committee members? So as far as the process today, what we're going to do, just for everyone's sake, is we're going to have the staff present the proposal and then ask the applicant if they would like to present as well. Following that, the committee members will ask questions of the staff and applicant. And then after that, we will open the public comment period on this item. And then we will have a staff response to the public comments after that. Then we will have the committee discussion and statements by each of the committee members regarding their views of the project itself. So with that.
But before you start that, I just have one thing I'd like to bring up that before we talk to the planner, has to do with the disclosure form. And I think it's important to discuss that right now.
Go ahead, Arthur.
I don't understand why the disclosure form is incomplete. You know, the requirements are individuals and general and limited partners need to be identified, and you know, there's no individuals identified at all for the applicant, and I'd like to understand that.
Amy, would you like to comment here?
I think I'll actually refer to Connor, if possible, on that disclosure form.
Well, we might as well introduce Connor. Welcome, Connor.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Connor McKay, city planner, and I have not had the pleasure to present at the Waterways Advisory Committee yet, so I'd like to introduce myself. It is great to be here. So regarding the disclosure form, that is a good question. So I believe that the applicant has submitted multiple versions of their application, and it's entirely possible that the one that was included with this packet was not the one that includes all of the team members. I'm checking on the previous versions right now, but In the meantime, Andrew, do you have any response?
Sure. So I'm looking at the disclosure form dated April 19, 2021. It does indicate that it provide the names of individuals, partnerships, corporations, LLCs, or trust who had an interest in the proposed land use action. Listed are Stony Point Flats LP, Phoenix Development Company, which is an administrative general partner, IH Stony Point Flats Santa Rosa LLC, which is a managing general partner, and IH Stony Point Flats Santa Rosa LLC, which is a limited partner. Based upon the information presented, I'm not quite certain what committee member Deaky is asking for individuals to be listed. Are you suggesting that the LLCs should list all individuals as well?
So, Andrew, my last name is pronounced Dikey, just
Sorry.
so, and I've never seen one quite like this before, and that's why I'm bringing it up. It says, partnerships identify all general and limited partners. LLCs identify all members, managers, partners, officers, and directors. And so I would expect to see individual people listed here. I have an LLC, and that's the way it has to be for me when I file paperwork. And so that's what I'm asking, why this has got a lot of organizations on it, but no people.
Great. Okay, well, we'll have to check with the city attorney's office and establish what does need to be listed for LLCs, but I appreciate your comments and reflection on that. And if we do need to revise and have this disclosure form updated following review by the city attorney's office, we'll do so.
Okay, and I just want to add, because I use this as the basis to determine if I have any conflicts or anything like that, and I couldn't actually completely do it.
That's why it's provided, so I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will hear the presentation by Connor McKay.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so this is the Stony Point Flats project located at 2268 Stony Point Road. And just to reiterate, the purpose of this meeting is for the opportunity for advisory comments from the Waterways Advisory Committee as to how the proposed project may meet the city's goals related to the city's Creek Master Plan, General Plan, and zoning code policies and standards. As a reminder, no final or formal action on this project is being taken at this meeting. So this project proposes to construct a new 50-unit affordable multifamily development on an undeveloped 2.9 acre parcel. The project includes the construction of bike storage, laundry facilities, tech center, fitness facilities, and playground facilities. Solar panels will be installed on top of the two main residential structures, which will allow the project to operate at net zero energy in accordance with Title 24. And just to provide a little bit of background on the project. So the project application was submitted on April 22nd, 2021. We held the pre-application neighborhood meeting on May 3rd, 2021. And we held a concept design review at the design review board on June 3rd, 2021. The project is located at 2268 Stony Point Road in the southwest quadrant of the city of Santa Rosa. It is north of Roseland Creek. So here we have an updated site plan. The site plan has actually been modified, accounting for the comments made by the public and the design review board throughout the review process of the project so far. The updated site plan has removed the pool area and pool building. It's combined the two accessory buildings into one, which is located at the project's entrance right here, with the two residential structures right here. The approximate disturbed area is 2.03 acres. And like I said, the site acreage is approximately 2.93. So that leaves 0.9 acres of undisturbed site acreage. And this aerial rendering is actually the previous site plan or concept. So this is basically kind of just a conceptual look at how the project will look generally. Obviously, the pool area and one of those two accessory buildings will not be are not being proposed at this time anymore, as I've mentioned. And we have conceptual elevations of the residential buildings, and these are also, I believe, the exact design and colors and such are still being developed, but this is a general rendering of what it might look like. As far as the California Environmental Quality Act, the applicant is still conducting the CEQA process. They are preparing an initial study. Once this initial study has been received by the city and reviewed, the appropriate CEQA pathway would then be determined. And I believe the applicant team, many members of the applicant team are in attendance. And I'm not sure if they don't have a presentation, but I'm not sure if they would like to make comments that complement the presentation that I've just given. But I am available to answer any questions, and I have my email and phone number on these slides.
Are there any members of the applicant team that would like to make comments? I would suggest that the major interest of the committee, of course, is the interface of the project to the creek, but you're welcome to make any comments you'd like regarding the project.
That would be fantastic. I thank you, Chair. I appreciate the members of the committee taking the time and giving us the consideration today on this project. My name is Phil Wood. I am the president of Integrity Housing. We are co-developing Stony Point Flats with Phoenix Development. I'm joined today by Angie Ponce, Vice President of Integrity Housing, our architect Keith Labus from KTGY, Dennis Dalby from Civil Design Consultants, Justin Heacock from JJH Landscape Architects, and Lori Moneris and Christine Fukusawa from Dudek Environmental Consulting. We wanted to have as many of our design team members present as possible in order to answer all questions in depth. We're pleased today to be able to bring Stony Point Flats before the committee. Some very high level background, and I'll try not to rehash too much of what Connor went through out of respect for everyone's time. But Stony Point Flats was awarded low-income housing tax credits, it was a special allocation dedicated under the Federal Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2020, specifically to provide relief in consideration for the loss of housing units due to the recent wildfires. Stony Point Flats is going to bring 50 new homes to Santa Rosa households that will be earning between 30 and 60% of the area median income. The project is proposed as 50 multifamily units on a 2.93 acre parcel. This creates a density of just over 17 units to the acre. The general plan land use for the property is split currently between medium and low density residential. With the overall site and the apportionment of each land use, it allows for a density of 49.74 units. So we're a fraction of a unit over there. The project will apply for a density bonus in consideration of the affordability being offered, which with the density bonus language then allows for the unit count to round up, which will take us to 50 units. And so we're not asking for any additional residential units that would typically be allowable under that density bonus application. The site does sit currently below the FEMA 100-year floodplain levels. We have a plan and a design that will raise the site above this level in order to make it suitable for residential development. A letter of map revision will be filed with FEMA in connection with that work. We've presented the project before the neighborhood, before the design review board in a conceptual design review, and we are sensitive to all of the comments that have come in, and we are doing our best to incorporate as many of those comments into the project. And many of the comments that we have received have been very helpful to the design team to truly make this not only the best project for the future residents that will call it home, but also for the neighborhood that it will be developed in. So as Connor highlighted, we have combined both of the common area amenity buildings A and B into one building. We removed the swimming pool. We do understand that the area has a precious resource with its water. We're sensitive to the ever developing drought conditions that we are seeing. So the pool has been removed, and that allowed us to move the residential buildings further west towards Stony Point Road, and allowed us to really open up the amount of area that we are leaving undisturbed. So at this point, we're now able to leave nearly a third of the site undisturbed. It will not, the levels will not be raised above the floodplain. It will be left truly undisturbed. We've removed the perimeter fencing, trying to create more of an open feel and environment with the project. And then we are also revising our landscape plan to ensure that all of the landscape that we are planning is in connection with the project is truly part of the natural fauna that is present in the creek in the area to date. Our goal here is to create a project that enhances the beauty of the creek. We obviously have parcel lines. We are not developing over those parcel lines. We're not disturbing over those parcel lines. There will be no offsite improvements as part of the project to the creek. So the creek will not be impacted separately. Our project will be solely kept to within the parcel boundaries. And we are excited for it. We are excited to have eyes on the creek here. And we think that this will be a great project to enhance the area.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Is that the end of the presentation by the applicants at this point?
Yes, and we are happy to answer any questions or further explain any details of the project that might be helpful.
Thank you, sir. With that, are there questions of the committee for staff or the applicant? I see Carol. Carol, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you. I was taking some notes during that presentation. Could I get a little clarification of what a third of the site, quote, undisturbed means? I was following, the whole project is moving forward with the elimination of the swimming pool in those buildings, which creates more open space at the back. Describe how the undisturbed property plays out for me so I can see that better.
Connor, would it be possible to bring up slide number 5 in your presentation?
Yeah, one sec.
Thank you. Visuals will help tremendously here. So this is our revised site plan, and we would have loved to be further through the development of this, but we are currently in the middle of our revisions right now. But the grayed area will be the portion of the parcel that will be developed. The white phase, everything to the east there, you can see it's still in the rectangular box. That portion of land will be left as is. We will not be turning dirt over in that area. There will be no part of the project that is developed on that area. It will sit as it sits today.
But one would assume that there will be children. Is it going to be open for kids to ride their bicycles on? Is it going to be open space for this project just left fallow, or is it going?
It will be open. There will be no fencing around it. Currently, we are looking at the future North Point Parkway, which will be moving through a portion of this parcel. It will be dedicated to the city for that future parkway expansion. We have not had the conversations yet with planning, but the development team would be open to vacating that entire portion of the parcel.
So I guess for all intents and purposes, what I saw when I was out there the day before yesterday is how it will look if and when this project is built.
Yes, with the exception of any buildings that are out there. I have not seen this overlaid yet on the current satellite image. There are barns out there, accessory buildings in connection with the current pasturing activities. Those would be, from a safety standpoint, those would be demolished and removed. But I believe this far out on the parcel is purely the pasture land, which would be left undisturbed. Any fencing around there would be taken down and removed.
So the project would take care of responsibility for, say, weed maintenance, but it would not be landscaped, it would not be paved over, it would be left in its natural condition.
Correct, yes.
And my second question, and here's where I need to apologize, as far as fencing of the development to the creek, could you review that part one more time?
Sure. So initially, we had looked at having a perimeter fence around the entire site. But one of the things that came out of our conceptual design review was leaving the openness to that creek trail and the aesthetic, the feeling that is created when you have a linear fence running that entire property line. It is a lengthy line, even within the grade development box that we're looking at right now. So we're removing the fence in order to create more of an open feel from the property into the creek.
On that note, could you tell me what the long black bars are at the property line?
Yes, and Dennis Dalby, would you like to speak to that? I want to say those are bioretention.
Yes, Phil, I can speak to that. This is Dennis Dalby, Civil Design Consultants, the project civil engineer. That is the required stormwater low impact development BMP features that will clean and capture stormwater per the city's LID manual. So Carol, to be more specific, they are infiltration basins that will be planted, and that's where the storm drain is directed. And they're on both the south and the north sides of the property.
Perfect. Could you tell me elevation for eyes on the creek purposes?
Elevation currently based on the current FEMA map, we are going to be at the east side, that most easterly building will be about 1.5 feet above existing ground. And as we move to the west, as the land falls, we'll be about 3.5 feet above existing ground at that very front building.
For eyes on the creek purposes, will people be able to see over these structures? Excuse my ignorance here. These are pretty much ground level with plantings. They're not.
They are sunken. The ones on the south side are 6 inches deep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Art?
Yes, thank you. I've been out of town all week and I didn't get this updated site plan. I mean, this is the very, very first time I've seen it. And so when I look back on my email, it looks like it was sent out on Tuesday. And so I never had an opportunity to look at it, because what I'm not seeing here is, the setback mapping, how that would have changed, because when I looked at the building that was initially in the far left-hand corner, the southwest corner, it looked like it was actually encroaching on the setback. And it looked like it might have just been the roof overhang. And now it looks like that building's been moved north. And so, and then I can see that the whole eastern section of this looks like it's been removed, and now there's a whole open space, and I think that was mentioned. And there are numerous other changes when I'm looking at this that I quite frankly, I haven't had time to look at the entire thing. So that's my first comment. So I have a hard time analyzing the original setback that were included in the civil package and I had questions on that, but now I'm not quite sure because it seemed like I couldn't discern where the top of the bank was. And I saw some 15-foot setbacks to the property line. It was really hard to understand. So I want to make note of that. One note to the staff is I've asked in the past that the overall watershed map be a little bit easier to understand so we can see exactly where the project is. And it's just really difficult to see when it's on such a high scale. So that's just one comment to that. I don't quite understand the stormwater drainage and so how that works. So Dennis, I appreciate you identifying on this site map, but it looks like we have a lot of black areas somewhere in the central area, and I'm not sure where it actually drains and outlets into the creek. And so if we have something that shows that, I'd appreciate it. On that access, I guess the access and fencing is more of a comment for later, but it just seems to me that the access should have fencing, just because there's a lot of homeless encampments along this, and so it seemed like there should be access through gated areas, but removing all the fencing, I don't know if that seems like a right thing to do in the overall the way our community is. And there were some other questions I had on the original site plan, which there's some blue annotations that I don't quite understand, but I don't see those on this one that's being shown. And I saw that our committee member, Adam Sharon, who's on the DRB, he made comments because I was really hoping to see, since he's a landscape architect, we would hear what he had to say on this. But it seems like his comments were made of the DRB, and it looks like there was, I just went through the minutes real quick, and it looks like there were some things that were addressed on that. I'd like the applicant to discuss what changes to landscaping and were mentioned and what changes they made to their site plan. So those are my initial questions I have right now.
Thank you. And I think I'd like to start with the top of bank setback question. I'm hoping that Dennis is able to speak to that.
Hi, Connor. Yes, I can. So we, as part of our entitlement process, we had our surveyor, St. Queenie Passerino, go out and survey the creek itself. And you can see that in the graphic up on the screen. That is a ground topo that was prepared by the surveyor, and they identified the top of bank. And you can kind of make it out on this plan. The creek trail, which is a dashed line, above the flow line of the creek, just behind that is where the top of bank was surveyed. So that, yes, yeah, right, yes. So that hand is going through the creek trail, and just to the north of it, you see another little dashed line that's representing the top of bank of the creek.
And then I believe we also had questions about the landscaping, if any landscaping changes or just landscaping discussion in general.
Well, this is I'm sorry, this is Justin Heacock. I'm the landscape architect on the project. And, from a design standpoint, we didn't change much about how we're going to interface with Roseland Creek on that side of the property. The intent was to incorporate a native and native compatible plant material, trees and shrubs and ground covers, to naturalize that area and try to marry it to the adjacent Roseland Creek and adjacent, which I believe is non-native grassland and kind of scrub material. I had an opportunity while we were going through this process of doing the conceptual to review some of the Roseland Creek conceptual exhibits and looked at some of the, plant palette and community plant material. And we're looking at incorporating some of that into the site to further integrate, the on-site design with the off-site. And that's the intent. All of those water quality basins along the lower portion of the site, directly interfacing with Roseland Creek, is going to be planted in a way to create kind of a natural swale that's going to be an opportunity, as well as a structurally, water treatment facility as well.
So can I just follow up on this? You're saying this is the area above the creek, in the creek setback itself?
Yes, between the buildings and the property line on that side of the property.
But between the property, okay, but just north of the creek itself, you're saying to where the property will be developed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the intent of the overall design is to incorporate mostly native and native compatible low water use plants to minimize the amount of water usage and runoff into the creek, and then look at incorporating plantings that'll help visually and aesthetically kind of tie the the best parts of the surrounding areas to the project, and vice versa.
It's very challenging trying to figure out the extent of the landscaping that is planned in that area map, as you can imagine.
Sure. Yeah. We took into account the locations of the existing trees on the site, and the idea was to try to, reinforce that stand of trees along the creek there. So tree species and locations will interface with the existing tree community, so it feels a little more natural. Maybe not, it won't be straight all native, but because certain trees and shrubs will lend itself to screening and those sorts of things. So, but the idea would be to have a nice comprehensive palette that supports both the native landscape and the need of the project.
And once we move into the comment section, the committee can advise on specific landscape palettes and stuff of that nature. I was also hoping that Dennis or Phil, can you clarify the actual location of the buildings from the top of bank? I know that might be, that's obviously different from where the LID infrastructure is located. So can we just get a little bit of clarity on where the buildings are actually located away from the top of bank?
Yes, Connor, this is Dennis again. We are proposing a 30-foot setback from top of bank, and the buildings are outside of that setback.
Great, thank you.
And Chair Rabinowitz, if I can make a quick clarification as well. In talking with Steve Brady, this creek is considered channelized. So that does meet the setback requirements. So there is a reduction in the setback once a creek is channelized and is under ownership and control of Sonoma Water.
Thank you.
Connor, this is Dennis again. I'd also like to add that in the easterly section where future North Point Parkway is cutting through, you'll also see another dedication line. So what we are proposing also is to dedicate that southeast corner to the city of Santa Rosa, or to the water agency, for the future master plan improvements for Roseland Creek.
Great, thanks, Dennis.
Charles, please.
So one question I didn't hear responded to is I still don't understand the stormwater drainage. I don't know where it outlets and where it inlets into the creek.
Hey, Art. So generally the site is going to drain to both the north and the south through the water quality basins. Mm-hmm. And in the southwest corner of the project, there is an existing field drain.
Yeah. That
drains into the creek today. That's where our connection will be.
Okay, so these swales on the southern side are gonna all move generally to the west and then hit that field drain and go into the creek.
Yeah, that we will pipe to the field drain, and then the field drain has an existing outfall into the creek.
And then the areas that are in the parking lot that are black, what are those integrated into this drainage?
Yes, along the north property line, yes.
No, in the central part, and where, like down from that, just down slightly. Yeah, those things. What are those?
Those are just sidewalks and, hardscape.
Okay, so the only swales are these linear east-west on the north and south borders. Is that correct?
That's correct, Art.
Okay, and the north, what happens with the north? How does it drain outlet?
Same way. So everything generally drains to the west toward the entrance. There will be a structure at the end there that takes a pipe over, south to that existing field drain.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dennis.
You bet.
Charles?
Yeah, I think this may be a procedural question, but my understanding is that these are very preliminary drawings and that we'll have another chance to review more specific dimension site plans and grading plans with more information and a specific landscape plan. I mean, we're hearing a lot about them, but it would certainly behoove the committee to be able to look at these drawings in some detail if they'll be forthcoming. Is that procedurally how we're going to proceed here, or is this our only look?
I think your point is well taken, Charles, and that is something the committee definitely should consider. Amy, do you have any comment on the process on the as this item moves through the city's process?
Yeah, typically your committee is seeing things early in the process, so you can provide comments that may impact the design of the site and the structures. So at this point, if you do feel like it needs to come back, that is under your purview. So you can provide comments today and ask that it comes back at a later date. But that is up to your committee.
Okay, and if you could also speak to the CEQA process here, how the existing EIRs for the Roseland area specific plan might play into the CEQA analysis and what the status of the initial study for this is, so that we may know when we get definitive CEQA information on the project.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Connor.
Oh, okay. So the initial study is still in progress, and I would not feel comfortable speculating on how that future CEQA document, whatever results from that initial study, the analysis that's presented there. I'm not sure how we will incorporate the Roseland area Sebastopol Road specific plan EIR. Until we receive that analysis, I don't feel comfortable making any comments about how that might go.
Charles, did you have any follow-up, or did you feel your answer?
I think at this point, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
I wanted to just follow up for 1 second. Carol had asked about the fencing, and could you explain what your intent there is in terms of the fencing with the height and materials? Or has that decision been reached, or is that an open question at this point?
Sure. So at this point, we have actually removed the fencing. So, height and materials have been pulled from the equation there to create more of an open, natural environment as much as possible.
So there is no fencing between the project and the creek?
Correct. The original plan did intend to fence the entire perimeter of the project, but based on a number of the comments that we received during our conceptual design review, we've made the decision to eliminate the fencing.
Okay. Are there other questions by committee members? Carol.
This is a question for staff. The undisturbed area between the future North Point Parkway and this project, can you tell me what the master plan zoning for that is in comparison to the rest of the neighborhood and this new project?
When you refer to master plan zoning, do you just mean the general zoning district of this area of the property?
The parcel, what I'm going to call directly to the north, what is its future destiny?
I think she's referring to the general plan.
Correct. Thank you.
Let me take a look really quick. So this is actually one parcel right here, and this has a zoning of R318, which is the same as the project site zoning. And as far as the general plan, this portion of the northern area of the site, or the adjacent to the site, also has a medium density residential general plan land use designation, as does the developed the area of the subject parcel that is proposed for development. So, but across this extension area is the R16 and low density residential.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions by committee members prior to opening up the public comment? We don't see any.
I had a couple things, Steve, if I may.
Oh, Mark, please.
Yeah, every time I look at this map, my eyes are always drawn to the future North Point Parkway, which seems to be a big impact in combination with this project. Is that something that is for sure going to happen someday? I'm not sure if we can speak to this now, but it seems like it's definitely a reasonably foreseeable project that would interface in many ways with this project.
Yeah, and for that, I'm hoping that, I think Nancy Adams is in attendance. Are we able to elevate her to give her speaking permissions?
Yes, Nancy, I've given you the permissions to be able to speak. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Oh, thanks. I wasn't expected to speak. Hi, I'm Nancy Adams, and I work in the Transportation and Public Works Department for the city. And I'm sorry, I'm on another call as well. So to your question, I would certainly expect North Point Parkway to be developed. It's part of the city's planning policy documents related to circulation in that area. So yes, I would fully expect it to be built. Hopefully that answers your question.
And just to follow up on that, the project has been required to dedicate right-of-way in anticipation of development of this parkway, but it has not been identified in the capital improvements program.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it definitely takes out a chunk of the undisturbed land that'll be left after this project. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is the fact that I was looking through the Roseland Creek Restoration Plan, and it does call for a 50-foot setback from top of bank. So I'm wondering I'm not sure if that is force of law or if that's just guidance, but it seems like a number that's out there for this particular parcel.
Connor, would you like to handle this one, or Steve Brady?
Yes, Steve, are you able to respond to that one?
Give me 1 second while I give him speaking permissions.
Thank you.
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, so the part of the Rosen Creek restoration plan does call for a 50-foot setback, but my recollection is, I don't have that right in front of me, but it is the area east of Burbank Avenue within the Rosen Creek Community Park area. So within this section, I believe just the regular city setback, creek setbacks would apply.
Alistair, I've given you speaking permissions as well.
Yeah, I am looking at the Roseland Creek concept plan that was developed or approved in 2002. And since that time, there's been discussion and changes in what's required, I believe, in the creek setback for a channelized channel. So Steve Brady, this does show a 50-foot creek setback on the concept plan in this area, but I don't believe that would be applicable today, given that it's a water agency's channelized creek.
And if I can, I'll add to, this is Andrew Triple, supervising planner for current planning. I would like to add to Steve and Alistair's comments. I do believe that the zoning code, which would codify then the Creek Master Plan, is updated to reflect that when a condition presents where it's a fully channelized waterway and the channel is owned by or under the control of Sonoma County Water Agency, then structures can be closer to the top of the bank than that distance of 50 feet. So when that condition exists, when Sonoma County Water Agency reviews and approves or I guess approves a design in conjunction with the city's review, then that 50-foot setback is not required, which is what Amy had pointed out earlier in response to questions as well.
All right, thank you.
Are there any more questions before we?
Yeah, I have two more questions.
Okay, please.
Is any of this parcel designated officially as a wetland? Connor?
I am not sure.
Dennis might know.
Is Dennis, maybe Christine from the CEQA team?
Hi, this is Lori Menaris with DUDEC. And yes, according to the Army Corps of Engineers, it is a 3-parameter wetland. The applicants conducted a wetland delineation or had one conducted, and it was verified by the Army Corps of Engineers in 2019. And usually Army Corps delineation jurisdictional determinations are also recognized by the Water Board, Regional Water Quality Control Board, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Okay.
So there are 0.063 acres, so less than a tenth of an acre of 3-parameter wetlands.
Oh, where is that located?
They're kind of scattered throughout, but largely on the south side of the property. So kind of, it's almost like they'll be largely converted into some of those LID features, will serve a similar purpose of what the current functions are of the wetlands.
Okay, and then my other question is, I just want to continue to understand, the point that Charles made. So was the DRB a conceptual DRB, and then is it going to go back to their DRB when there's more finalized plans, Connor?
Yeah, so the DRB provided concept review, and typically this project would go to the zoning administrator for final design review, but the director has elected to elevate the review of the project to the design review board for final design review.
Okay, so then potentially, if there were, so how would it work? I mean, I understand we can request to see it again, but if it goes back to design review board in the final compilation, will it naturally come back to us?
I think if we wanted to take it back to the Waterways Advisory Committee, we would want to do that prior to receiving final design review at the DRB.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we're now going to be taking public comments on item 6.1. And Michelle, do you want to make any comment here?
Yes, thank you. Okay, if you wish to make a comment, please raise your hand. For our call-in participants, you will please dial *9 to raise your hand, and then you will press *6 to unmute. And public comment today will be 2 minutes, and there will be a timer up on the screen. And it looks like we do have some hands. Give me just one moment. Okay.
Thank you. We do ask that you do have your comments to be a maximum of 2 minutes.
Stephen, I have given you, you should have a prompt allowing you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let me get the timer up for you.
In case my internet connection is bad, I'll put my comments in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Can you verify that you see the timer?
I do see the timer.
Okay, once it starts, it'll reset to 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. So I got the card in the mail talking about this project, and ever since then I've been, trying to inform myself about the impacts. This is just to let you guys know, this is the 5th subsidized housing complex within 1,500 feet of my house. I have a lot of experience with these. I know how they change the community. And this one in particular, I was surprised that it is being built squarely inside a flood zone, the 100-year FEMA flood zone, not a portion of it, the entire project. And then on top of that, you're paving nearly the entire project, and then you're saying that you're going to discharge all this new water into the creek, which is essentially serving as a flood control channel. On top of that, I think the city of Santa Rosa and all local agencies need to seriously consider this paving versus groundwater recharge issue, because we are building things faster than we're allowing the groundwater to recharge. And this project is a perfect example of that. The plans that I saw had the entire storm drain from this entire impervious area going towards an existing 24-inch CMP. I don't think that's adequate. I'm assuming that they're going to revise that design later, but you can't drain, I think Connor said 2.3 disturbed acres into a existing 24-inch CMP. And then I'd also like to comment, if I'm running out of time here, there's a lot of confusion about what the public comments and the North Point Parkway and undisturbed area, but I guess.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. We now have Nick. Nick, you should have a prompt allowing you to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, let me restart the timer before you begin. Just one moment.
Well, I wanted to, before you start the timer, I just had a few questions first, and I was wondering if instead of the timer, I could have Mr. McKay throw up a couple of his slides, specifically slide 4 and 5.
Nick, if you could actually wrap your comments in, or I'm sorry, your questions in with your comments for the 2-minute period. That way we are giving the same amount of time to all participants.
I can't properly give my questions or comments without having these visual aids that I was requesting. That's all I was trying to do.
Well, we just, so that you're aware, we do have Connor taking notes. So if you can just, during your questions, reference what slides the question is in regards to.
All right.
He can pull them up when he opens it. I'm going to begin your time now. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I would like to address a few things that was brought up. First off, by committee member Carter. It seems that this needs to come before another meeting for the following reasons. First off, you have the setbacks that should be 50 feet given the floodplain location at the south end of the property that is currently being encroached upon by this development. It should be 50 feet in order to ensure that more of the water can permeate into the watershed underneath the creek rather than into the creek where it flows away for those of us who are on well water in the area, because it fails to provide adequate recharge into this area. Furthermore, I believe that the committee needs to be able to review once the full EIR is completed, so that this way they can adequately review the impacts that this development is going to have on the creek. Furthermore, you cannot discuss this project without also discussing the impacts of North Point Parkway on the creek, since how will the drains from the future parkway drain into the city, or I'm sorry, into the river and impact the creek? And again, that's more additional hardscape that is end up going to be removed. So while there's this quote unquote 1/3 area as shown in slide 5, that is going to be undisturbed, North Point Parkway is going to go there and it's going to encroach into the river. Additionally, North Point Parkway is going to remove that eucalyptus tree and other trees along the bank, which is specifically portioned and a requirement of this committee to review and ensure that the destruction of the trees and vegetation are not destroyed and the habitat is retained. Additionally, the tiger salamander potentially lives in this area, and it's important that the EIR reflects and a study is done for those. Thank you for your time.
Okay, next we have Ryan. Ryan, you should have a prompt allowing yourself to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, let me restart the timer for you so you have the full 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ryan Schwab. I live on Trombetta Street, and I do want to say I do appreciate the design team trying to make this project work, but as everybody can see and hear, we're still trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And there are so many potential issues with this project that we're in fear of, especially during the drought. I walk this trail alongside it very often. I see the amount of wildlife that is out there in both the creek and the parcel set to be developed. This drought is seriously taking a toll on the environment, and this area of the creek should remain undisturbed. We'll be looking back, in 5-10 years, and when there's no living organisms part of the creek or part of this parcel, we're going to be really saddened, very disappointed. And the other issue is Stephen and Nick have touched on is all the water that would normally, permeate into the ground and help recharge the groundwater, which we all got the 20% voluntary notice to reduce water because there isn't enough water. It's just going to be mixed with the pollutants from this project and carried away by the creek. And what we need for people that are unwell and other residents that do get their water via groundwater is not for everything to be paved over, making it complete hardscape. We really need to leave some semi-rural space undisturbed. We can't just continue paving over and building on everything.
Thank you, Ryan. If anyone else has any comments or questions, please raise your hand now. For our call-in participants, you can press *9 and that will raise your hand. And I am not seeing any other hands.
Okay, unless there are others who are interested in speaking, we will be closing the public portion of the item, public participation portion. Is there anyone else to give you one more chance? Guess we don't see anyone. Correct, Michelle?
It looks like we do have one more. Give me just 1 second. Nick, you should have a prompt to be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one little thing. I won't be taking the full time. Is that while my understanding is that this can be a 30-foot setback, it is not required and is under the purview to recommend a 50-foot setback still under this condition. And I think given the floodplains and given the fact that this is a wetland pursuant to the Army Corps of Engineers, that a 50-foot setback would be required and permissible in this situation, even though there is a potential for a 30-foot setback permitted. That's pretty much the only additional thing I wanted to say. Thank you for the extra time.
Okay.
Thank you. With that, I see no other hands. And if you want to move forward.
Yes, with that, I will move forward, and we have ended our public participation portion of this meeting. But I would like to then go back to Connor and have you respond to any items you feel are needed to respond to by you at this point for the benefit of the committee.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the development during the drought, I have a couple pieces of information on that. I'm sure all of us are aware, and obviously this is a water-focused board, so I just wanted to identify that due to water supply planning and implementation of aggressive water use efficiency strategies, Santa Rosa's population has actually doubled since 1990, while our total water use has decreased by 14%. So I feel like that's an important kind of piece to include in this discussion about drought and development and limited water resources. Santa Rosa has a plan in place to address short-term effects of drought, which are incorporated into our long-term water supply planning efforts. This development is required to be extremely water efficient, more water efficient than existing buildings, and compliance with the city's water efficient landscape ordinance and various Cal Green building code standards would require this new development to be 20% more water efficient than what exists throughout our city. And new development actually often exceeds this target. So, and then the setbacks, let's see. So according to our creekside development standards in the zoning code, where a fully channelized waterway exists and Roseland Creek is considered a channelized waterway and the channel is owned by Sonoma Water, structures may be closer than the top of bank than a distance of 2.5 times the depth of the bank plus 50 feet, provided that this encroachment into the setback area will not obstruct or impair the channel's hydraulic functions, impede water agency access, impair the stability of the slope, or impair the stability of the creek bed fountain as determined by the Department of Planning, the Public Works Department, and the Sonoma County Water Agency. So therefore, a 30 or 50-foot setback would not be required. And as no development is proposed to be located on the Sonoma County Water Agency's land, there's not any issues anticipated with this proposal. Trying to think of what else. The reduction of the site plan introduces a lot more vacant, undeveloped land that will allow for additional groundwater recharge. And I also want to mention that the general plan and specific plan and the zoning code, for that matter, can identify areas that should be preserved for open space. There's a specific designation in each of these plans that identifies areas that should be left undisturbed completely. And this site in particular has a zoning designation of R318, which allows for multifamily development, residential development by right. And then the general plan and specific plan both identify this parcel as a site for medium density residential development. So in project design, we should definitely incorporate policies of the Creek Master Plan and other creekside standards, but the like I mentioned, the zoning code and the general plan identify the site for development. So throughout the review process, we do our best to balance the policies of the creek standards and such with the designated potential of this site for residential development. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Andrew, do you want to follow up and fill in any of the cracks that I've missed?
No, Connor, I think you've addressed everything sufficiently. We can always continue to respond to questions from the committee. So thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, why don't we go to the committee, see if there are any more questions of the staff, and then we would proceed to making the recommendations.
I have. So is there any restriction on building in the 100-year flood zone? Connor or Andrew? I mean, I think you just get insurance for it. I mean, we have a lot of things that are built in the 100-year flood zone. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't build in the 100-year flood zone, is there?
No, we do have chapter 18-52 of the city code does address flood damage protection and would regulate development in the flood zone.
So what does it regulate?
Well, standards of construction, floodways and such. So
Yeah.
in building division reviews the flood damage protection.
And this project is within the 100-year flood zone?
I believe so, but I would ask Dennis Dalby to confirm. I don't know if Dennis is with us still to confirm that point.
Okay.
But Steve Brady has commented that.
He's here now.
Okay,
I
great.
see him coming in.
Yeah, I just saw him as well. Thank you.
Hi, Andrew. So flood zone, flood protection, generally what is required is that the finished floor of the habitable buildings are 1 foot above the designated flood elevations on the firm maps.
And that's been done with this project?
Yes, there's a datum difference between the firm map and the City of Santa Rosa datum, but yes, we are at least 1 foot above the established flood elevations.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. And since you're on, Dennis, this question is going to come back to you. On the bioswales, these also provide infiltration, right?
Correct. That's a requirement.
So I forget what the impermeable area of the project is, but not all of that is going to get to the field drain, correct? It's going to be infiltrated in these swells.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That's actually correct. The BMPs for the stormwater program are required to not only treat the stormwater runoff, but also capture a calculated amount of stormwater. And that is that's part of the bioretention BMP. So it's a cleaning function and it's a capture function.
Thank you. And then my last question, I have comments, but my last question is this 50-foot, 30-foot issue has just really confused me. I mean, I'm looking at the staff report and it talks about a required 30-foot setback, but now I'm hearing potentially you don't even need a setback. I thought Andrew might have said, or Connor said. So I kind of need clarification on this and to understand that. Can someone comment on that?
Sure, I'll go ahead and comment. The project, both the current application before us and the concept that's also been provided by the applicant has always maintained a minimum 30-foot setback from top of bank. which from one perspective could say is consistent with the code for that requirement, but then the code also does provide exceptions for development adjacent to those channelized waterways. The zoning code does not make exceptions for certain circumstances. So I think by way of comparison, when we think about the scenic road corridors, you know, certain corridors have certain standards that have to be achieved and regulate development as well as tree removal and such along those corridors. And if codification of the Creek Master Plan was to be sensitive to concepts proposed in the master plan, then it would have carved out exceptions or specific regulations for certain creek sections. Since it didn't do that, then we would apply that exception to any development along any creek if it meets those requirements. And then of course that is subject to approval by the Sonoma Water, the property owner, as well as city, Steve Brady's department, and then city planning as well.
So they could be within the 30-foot setback potentially, and but they're not.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So they could.
And then the last question is this is from Michelle. The chat comments, those will be presented to the developer. Is that correct? Because the developer seems to be very amenable to hearing these things.
Yes, I am saving the chat comments and they will be provided to the planner, to Connor, and then he can share them out.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions by committee members? Carol.
So I've been looking at Google Earth this whole time, looking at the neighborhood, which is a fascinating overview. And I'm wondering if staff can give me some perspective. An awful lot of development has happened in this area over, say, the last 20, 25 years. Entire neighborhoods were built 20 years ago, also backing on the creek, it appears. And I'm wondering if the standards have changed at all, if it's a more lenient approach the city's taking, a more stringent approach. How are the standards that projects in 2021 are being held to compared to neighborhoods also backing on this creek that were built, say, in the late 20-teens? I think the Trombetta neighborhood was built about 2000. Does that give you enough information to address staff what my concern or my need for education?
Sure. No, that's great. And a great question. Thank you. So I would say that the standards that we are reviewing this project under today are the most restrictive standards that have been in place. And I'll invite Steve and Amy and Alistair to comment as well, because I am newer to the city. I've only been here 5 years, so certainly I believe there's you know, some historic activity that could inform these comments. But at this point in time, it looks like the last amendment to the creek side development standards was done in the 2004-2005 timeframe, and so maybe the creekside development standards were only codified in the early 2000s. So development happening prior to that was not subject to standards. But then with the development of the Creek Master Plan and then codification of the Creek Master Plan, then we do see the emergence of those more restrictive standards to which development is subject. So please, other city staff, please feel free to chime in, because it is a very interesting question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if Steve or Alistair wanted to weigh in. But Andrew, I think your response was right on. I will say that overall, you are seeing a lot more development occurring within this area because of the specific plan, and it's designated as a priority development area. And so that is a decision that was made when the priority development area was established and the specific plan process proceeded. And but there is a new opportunity to kind of review and comment on the growth of the city and where that growth occurs. And that process is really the general plan process. Also, Plan Bay Area is out for public review as well. And that is a regional planning document that does talk about the priority development areas in each community and the growth that is entertained within those and how that fits into the whole regional planning concept. So I think if there are folks on the line who want to review those processes and documents, that's a really good place to comment on the amount of development that may be occurring in the area. But Andrew's comments are correct in terms of the actual creek master plan and how that interplays and what that timeline is.
I can just add one thing, and I think Andrew covered it well, but one thing is the original creek setbacks, I believe, were actually in the late 1990s, and then in 2004 is when they were enhanced at that time. And one thing too, really with the creek master plan, the creek master plan is not where you go for creek setbacks. We look at the zoning code. So the creek master plan didn't change anything with that. So just always keep that in mind whenever there's a creek thing. I mean, we look for the creek master plan for, you know, areas that call for restoration and trails, but it's really not the place for creek setbacks at this time, the way it's set up. We look at the zoning code, and in this case, it's complicated because you have the 50 feet, the 30 feet, and you have an exception. And I did, during the meeting, was able to review more parts of the Rosen Creek restoration plan. And like I mentioned earlier, there is a distinction between the creek setbacks within the future Rosen Creek Community Park area. So there, the plan actually did call for a 50-foot creek setback, where the rest of the plan actually showed a drawing of the approximate location of where a 50-foot setback would be if those applied to a project, I think.
That's great, Steve. Thanks. And yeah, I did forget that in 2004, I believe there was basically a republication of the zoning code. And so when I was looking at my reference materials, I think that's why it only went back to 2004. But you know, Steve brings up a very interesting point, and point, and Chair, I think that from your perspective, your past service to the city, you could also appreciate and inform any comment you might want to have about this. If we think about the general plan as embodying the community's vision for that long-term, you know, long-range development of the community, and then our specific plan still doing the same thing, reflecting vision, but getting more specific, then the policies that are contained in those plans are then codified through the zoning code. And so when we review a project, we do have to look at how those certain policies are codified. So you know, density and allowable densities are in part established by the general plan, but then codified through zoning districts. So when we look at this project and we see that the maximum allowable density for the project site would be 49 units, and then we review the zoning code and we learn that the zoning district does permit this by right, then that starts to set the parameters for which the project is reviewed. And so to understand that kind of process from vision to policy to codification to project review, I think is very important, especially in the conversations that we're having about projects in the Roseland area. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions of staff before we continue on with our statements? Okay, why don't we start with Art?
Okay, thank you. There's some big sheep on this property. I was amazed to see that when I looked at the property, but that's just kind of a fun thing to say. I appreciate the staff with being able to respond and answer all of our questions. I appreciate the developer and his and their professionals to be open to making changes and working with the neighborhood and with the city regulations and what our comments are going to be. And I appreciate the neighbors for being active and respectful and bringing up very good points. So I just want to say that. I'm not sure that removing the fence is a good idea. It seems like there should be something that allows access and provides security and fencing. So I just want to point that out. I'd sure like to see more about the landscaping. I just don't have a good feel for how this project interacts with the creek through the landscaping. Like to understand that better. And I really need to see more about the wetlands. I wish we would have had a map. We'd see how that was discerned. If Army Corps and Fish and Wildlife are involved with that, or even the Water Board, I'd like to know what they did with it and how this interacts, how the wetlands put. And this is a really, really small area, and wetlands definition is elusive, not always clear, but sure would like to have something to look at to understand it a little bit better, and we didn't have that. So because of those comments, I'd really like to see this come back to our committee for further evaluation. And that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Art. Charles.
Well, I think Arthur summed up our reservations, or my reservations anyway, about the project. I think the explanations we've gotten today from staff and the applicant make it sound like a good project. I certainly think we could have done more to review the project in the context of the general plan and the Roseland specific plan to understand that those overarching policy documents guide what we do in these areas, even though our purview is how the project specifically interacts with the creek, and possibly more context about the creek master plan and how it affects our review of the project. So as Arthur said, more specific landscape information would make it much easier to comment and provide direction on the project. Dimension site plan, so we understand where the buildings lie in relation to the top of the bank, and grading plans that show us how the water flows and moves onto and off of the site and into the creek, if that's where it ends up. And perhaps a brief statement on the general hydrology. I think everything we've heard tells us that it's being treated properly, but we don't have any documents that show us that. And because of that, I would like to also see the project come back with, as I said, more specific landscape information, grading, and dimension site plan information.
Thank you, Charles. Mark.
Often when projects come into us, they've already gone through all the stormwater calculations, all the mapping. So since this is a conceptual thing, we don't have that information. We often do. We have to assume it's going to be done correctly. I think I definitely want to second what Art said. Everybody's been doing a great job, and I really appreciate their work on this, especially when it gets contentious in any way. But yeah, I think it should come back to the committee at some point when it's maybe better firmed up the details on stormwater, because I share the same concerns about kind of a black box right now as far as what's actually going to happen on the site. So that's pretty much all that I have to say at this point.
Thank you, Mark. Carol.
I'd also like to express appreciation to both staff and to the presenters and the neighborhood. I've been on this particular board for, I think, a little over a year now. And I think projects like this are going to become more prevalent, especially in this area, and how we handle our review of this project as it relates to the waterway. This isn't going to be an isolated case. And I think how we weigh in what our concerns are moving forward, this is kind of a template for additional projects, specifically the project directly to the north of it. If this one goes in, say, in the next 2 years, its potential sister project may go in 4 years, and that's more pavement, and it also backs on the creek. These projects don't work in isolation, and I'm concerned that however we address this project needs to be a prelude for how we look at other projects. If a high density project or any project goes in of this magnitude that borders on a creek, we need to be consistent in our approach. So with that as a prelude, I don't have nearly enough information on this project to say anything other than, well, this is very interesting. But I don't have what I need right now to say anything other than I'm all for high density housing. I don't happen to live in this neighborhood. I think how I would feel emotionally if I did live in this neighborhood would be far different from the objective stance I'm able to take. And I want to say that I appreciate people who live near a project of this magnitude relate to it differently than I do. That's it.
Thank you, Carol. I do want to thank the staff. I want to thank the applicants for their openness, and then particularly I want to thank the people representing the public who came and testified and provided us with information and questions that we hope we have at least begun to answer. I think generally the project, I generally support the idea of the project. There are some details, of course, that many details that are left to be discussed, as my fellow members of the committee have pointed out. Landscaping, the whole interface between the creek and the project itself is very undefined, like I guess by intent, but it makes it challenging to be able to really get a handle on how the project will relate to the creek itself, which is a big question for us. Particularly the landscaping and the fencing, which I think we need to consider a fence open in terms of its appearance, but a fence nonetheless, because my understanding is there is on private parcels, it's not allowable to have direct access onto water agency parcels. At least that's my understanding. So in that, other than that, I think also, as other members have said, we really should have this come back when it's more defined. And I think that process will continue, but I look forward to having this come back for us to have more of a specific way of evaluating the project. Any concluding comments by anybody else before we?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, thank you, Steve. And this is, I kind of separated this mainly for staff. In the future, if we have updates that come out to stuff like this, for me, it just wasn't enough time. And I know the email said we have an updated site plan, but I need better notification because I made my site visit. I did everything based upon the stuff I had originally. And so I just need more time. So that's the first thing. I hope we see an updated disclosure form when this comes back. And then this 50-30 exception issue, it should have been addressed in the staff report. We should have had that information initially to help us. And so this is just my feedback to the staff. Thank you.
Any other concluding comments by committee members? Amy, is there anything from your end that we need to consider or at this point?
No, we'll work with Connor on to bring this back at the appropriate time, and committee member Dyke, I absolutely hear you, and we'll definitely take note of that for the future meetings. Thank you.
Okay, well, we thank you all. And with that, we will now adjourn our meeting of the Waterways Advisory Committee. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Long, everybody.